All right, everyone. Good day today. Welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. Today, we've got some amazing guests on the Zoom call with us. We've got Jenny and Ronnie Gou, and Jenny is a managing partner at Vertical Street Ventures, established to help individuals achieve financial goals through passive real estate investing. And prior to that, she was a sales director at Procter Gamble in 13 years, working on brands like Dawn, Cascade, Swiffer, lots of brands that all of us recognize. And she's managed cross-functional teams and developed national sales strategies for the company's billion-dollar brands, including the Dawn and Cascade brand. And then Ronnie is also a functional team leader at Procter Gamble. He's got 15 years of experience in strategy and execution, and is previously a sales associate director for a $6 billion bounty and Charmin business. So Ronnie is now managing partner at Vertical Street Ventures, along with Jenny. And together, Jenny and Ronnie have almost 1,000 units under their control. Amazing. 297 as a KP or general partner in Arizona. And then they've got another 660 or so units as limited partners in Arizona, Texas, and Georgia. And then, of course, can't leave this out, you guys have 10 single family units as well.
so impressive, awesome. Guys.
So great stuff you guys have accomplished. Obviously, you've been very busy and you guys are working W-2 and starting to move a lot of your income from your active side to the passive side. So why don't we start at the beginning? How did you guys get interested in real estate? And how did you guys start growing, and what's new today?
Yeah, so we started when we were living actually in Cincinnati, both working at Procter Gamble. And as much as we enjoyed our W-2s, we thought, like many people, passive income, where to go find that? And the interesting thing about the Midwest is that's a great space and location to think about, real estate, right? And so we started with single family homes, frankly, very much like most people, right? And so we started accumulating single family homes while we were living there, literally one by one, right? And for about 2-3 years, we did that. And then we shifted gears about 18 months ago when Jenny decided to leave her W-2 job. So Jenny can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we, again, many of your listeners, I'm sure, started with single family. The light bulb went off, right? And then decided, oh my gosh, how do we scale this faster and bigger? And so we started learning about multifamily through podcasts and reading books and going to meetups. And we believed in the model so much so that we decided for me to leave my corporate job. So I left P&G in February of last year, right when everything was shutting down. And then just started my journey head dive into multifamily, found a mentor, ended up partnering with him by the end of the calendar year. Steve had just also left his W-2 job as well. And so we started the company Vertical Street. And since then, fast forward to now, we are focusing on syndications primarily in Arizona. But yeah, for both personally, Ronnie and I, we're able to purchase over 1,000 doors actually now at this point, both as passive and as syndicators. So really anything can happen despite what's going on with the rest of the world and within our country. So.
Of course. Yeah. And great point to bring that up, that anyone can succeed in any market as long as you put your mind to it. But what I'd like to do now is I want to back up a little bit further, right? Because we just easily said, we decided to go start out of state on single family.
Yeah, you guys made it sound like it was just,
it's easy. So what I would like to do is I'd like to back up a little bit more and ask you guys, where did you guys get interested in real estate? And how did you start the conversation to actually make the plunge to buy your first property?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is you think of it as it's so intentional. You want it to be so intentional. You make life choices, you design it. But in this case, it was somebody who I was at a gym, a CrossFit gym, and one of my friends there was like, hey, there's somebody here who also does property management, does real estate investing. We want to talk to her. And she explained to me the entire model, right? And fortunately, she was also a realtor, tenant finder, and property manager all rolled into one. And so she made it super easy. She's like, hey, you front the capital, I kind of handled the rest, right? Along the way, we're obviously investing ourselves, like learning about it and whatnot. The first one was easily the most, it's kind of like buying your own home, right? You treat it like your own first primary residence, right? You do that the first time, you get a tenant in and it feels good. And then eventually you kind of understand this is how, rental income works, right? This is how rental properties work. And so I can understand why, and it's only very natural for people to start that way. It only makes sense because it makes a lot of sense. Most of us have single family homes, you know what that looks like. I think the benefit for us in regards to multifamily is, truthfully, our W-2 jobs called for us to be really good operators. Running, these brands, very stressful, working with large retailers, working across different functions. That skill set for us translated very well and nicely into multifamily. It's something that you have to be disciplined in doing. Shareholders of a $70 billion company don't stand for slack. And to operate at that level, translating that to apartments was something that was fairly natural for us.
That's great. So when you guys started talking about this at home, you came up with the idea, or you were talking with someone at a gym, and then you come home. And Jenny, did you know about real estate before this, or did you have a background in it?
Yeah, my family growing up, we grew up in Arizona for the most of my upbringing, and my parents and my aunts and uncles, they all partook in the big boom right before the bust of 2007, 2008, right? However, they didn't exactly have the greatest business acumen to run out a great business plan. So they saw some downturn absolutely during that time frame. So I've always had that real estate in the back of my mind. My mom still has rental properties, growing up through high school and college, but it wasn't until we both started working that came back into play. And I'm a little bit more risk averse. He's a little bit more opportunistic around that area. And so really he was the one that started our journey down the road. And I was like, well, yeah, but do we need it? We have great jobs, both corporate, executives at a Fortune 100 company. Do we really need this extra income? And so we had a lot of back and forth conversation, and it's a lot of it is trust. He was really passionate about it. And so I trusted him to make good decisions with the money that we were earning. And then once we did buy our first house, it absolutely was probably the hardest one. But then 9 homes later, we found out it wasn't that hard. And once I saw the math and the financials come in, then I became a believer. And then the same thing happened for multifamily. Then he got on the multifamily train. He's like, okay, what if we purchased an apartment? And I thought he was crazy. And again, it took me a little bit longer to jump on the train, but once I did, we were off and running. So it definitely takes at least one of you in the relationship to push the other. And if you're lucky, you have both jump on the train real quick.
Yeah, Jenny, that's so cool. And I resonate with what you just said because, I'm usually like, the gas pedal and he's like the brakes, and then we switch roles. And so like you said, I love what you said about, you have to have that trust, and it sounds like you guys have so much synergy together, and even in those early days. And so what I want to just ask is, a lot of our listeners are just starting out, and when they hear that, oh my gosh, you guys went from like 0 to thousands, right? Like how, and what kind of conversations, what kind of advice can you give those couples that are just starting out to even just get on the same page?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we have working for us actually is at P&G, we were on the same teams working with each other in the past. And so we have a great working knowledge of how we operate outside of the home. Because as much as you know each other at home as spouses or parents together, it is so different in the workplace, and your styles can either clash or they can complement very well. And we fortunately have very complementary styles. We've seen that already in the teams we worked with formerly at P&G. And again, it just translated really naturally into the real estate space, which we're very fortunate to have as well. But I think the one advice or the one key when starting out working with your spouse, or talking about these types of big life impactful investments, is what is your open line of communication and how do you approach it? Because at first blush, if you're the risk averse spouse or partner, your first reaction is, like hands up, defensive, like that's a crazy idea. But my advice would just pause before you react and really just hear each other and listen before you give a reaction, because I think it makes the conversation so much easier and flow so much smoother if you just don't react first and hear each other's ideas. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, these type of things in terms of wealth creation and money, these are the crux of many issues, or, tailwinds for many relationships, right? And so I think we've come to realize that conversations like this, there's not a one specific goal. I think we have come to embrace the fact that if we have differences in our opinions, we almost embrace them. So we almost welcome the times when our conversations, and versus feeling tension or adversity, they're more like, it's very productive to talk through challenges, because you know that the end result's going to be better on the other side. You remove concerns, you're open about it, and versus running from tension, you almost embrace it, right? Because that allows for just a better line of, Jenny said, communication. So we've had tough conversations with each other, like, we're going to go here, we're not going to go do that. And sometimes we've been entrenched, and then we come to realize, hey, being entrenched does no good. We need to understand where each other is coming from. So
yeah, and then it doesn't help for him to admit that I'm always right.
Yeah, I know.
As well, so that makes it always end well.
That's awesome.
Wow, there's so many similarities between side and that side.
I remember somebody telling me, it's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Right. That's the goal there.
Was there a point in time, you guys, where you realized that the polarity of your ideas and the options that you guys are looking at was actually a productive thing? Like, did you guys ever have to talk about that very idea? Or how did that come up? Like, how did you guys start to, because it sounds like you guys are on the same page there, that if, you guys are having differences of opinions, then that's a healthy discussion. That's something that's that you've got something that's worth discussing and talking about the pros and cons of each side. And that means that you make better, well-informed decisions, which I completely agree with. Was there a point in time where you guys realized that, oh, this is what we should be seeking?
I can't recall any huge diversions in our ideas. But I think any point we get to a healthy tension of some sort, one of us does a good job of always pulling back and saying, okay, well, I think we have the same end goal. It's just how we get there looks a little bit different right now. And so when we realize that, we always have to pause, step back, and then recalibrate. And when we realize that, again, we're rowing in the same direction, we have to then just step back and say, okay, well, you're rowing a little bit at this degree. Can you pivot back? And here's why, right? So I think that's where we always tend to end. When we realize we're again heading in the right direction, the same direction, it's just we're thinking about it in different ways.
I'll give you an example of one where it was really a crucible decision for us, which was we were both working W-2 jobs, call it back in early 2020. And at the time, we were both team leaders, sales directors, and we were both traveling, at least one of us once a week. And we have 2 young kids, and we were seeing this is going to be tough, right? And so it's easy for us to look back and it was so natural for Jenny to leave her job and do this. But truthfully, both of us were really interested and passionate about real estate. Which one of us was going to leave our jobs, right? And we looked at it, and what we said was, look, what's the vision for where we want to get to? What is the strategies and what were the tactics? The tactic is one of us is going to leave our jobs, right? But what's the best approach to that, right? And so when we weighed what are the different options, it made more sense for me to stay. And honestly, I didn't see myself leaving P&G. We made the decision only recently for me to leave because I actually really like my job. But it only made sense for us moving forward for me to leave. But right now, at that point in time, we came together on what are those crucible decisions based on the vision we had for our total family.
I want to say here too that it's very clear that you guys have worked on your communication with one another, because you guys seem to be in line with each other, even when the other person isn't talking. You guys have already had discussions about this. Would you say that that communication and that type of, spousal, I guess,
Like
alignment,
synergy.
yeah,
Yeah,
synergy,
yeah.
would you say that that has contributed to your guys' success, or how much so?
Oh, 200%. Right. Gosh, I mean, we're really nerdy too about like self-development
Yeah.
and
Growth mindset.
growth mindsets and all of that through our personality, but also through the coaching and training we've had through our W2 world. We do this thing roughly every quarter or so, and we've done it for a long time, but we'll do a date night and we'll sit and we actually have a sheet of paper where we list our goals, right? And our goals, it could be financial, relationship, travel, things to do for fun. So we actually go through that and say, okay, what have we done? And then what do we need to add for the next, 3 to 5 years? And I think having that is super healthy to gut check what is working, what is not working. You do this, a lot of people do this in their jobs, right? You have checks with your manager, your performance reviews. So I hate to say a performance review with your spouse, but it's almost like that, where you are double checking formally, not just because, the life gets in the way. So do you dedicate time to check in with your partner to make sure everyone's still happy? And if not, then what is the solution to getting to that point? And I think because we do that, our conversations are easier and they're more effective and productive, and gets us to the next level.
Yeah. I'll give you another example of that, which was this planning and the ability to think through the different scenarios and think through our goals has allowed us to pivot. So if you found us 2 years ago, we would be living in Cincinnati, thousands of miles away from Orange County, California, which is where our family is, but we had a different vision for how life was going to go. But at any given point, you can reevaluate your priorities and say, hey, that's not what I want. But as this communication and goal planning, just because your goals are on paper, that's really not the end state. The end state is the journey, right? The journey of life, right? And so to have this communication allows for pivots in life when things happen. The reason why we moved back to California was my dad got sick, and we realized life is too short not to have that. My dad's much better now, by the way. He's doing really well, but to bring his grandkids to him, and we now live on the same piece of land together. My parents get to see my kids every single day, our kids every single day. That's invaluable, right? But those are things that we added as goals along the way, and not possible if you're not grounded in designing your life, right, in terms of how you want to live it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And something you said, Ronnie, like, a few minutes ago that really stuck with me and that I want to highlight for our listeners too, is that, often when couples come into certain, aspects of conflict, they, like you said, there's that tension. And what I heard from both of you was that you use them as access points to enter, to discover another layer, a deeper layer, profound layer, to connect deeper, right? And I think that, again, like I said, I wanted to highlight that because oftentimes when couples see differences, they use that as an excuse to part ways, to distance.
Yeah.
So wanted to just point that out because that was a piece of true wisdom right there. And then also, I loved what you said about designing your life. The fact that you both are designing it together with common vision. Can you talk about the importance of vision and the importance of big vision between couples?
I think very simply, a lot of times we have almost like paper goals, how much we want to make, the house you want to live in, the car you want to buy, whatever it is. I think we've come to realize these will evolve over time. We do write them down and we do talk about them in terms of what do we want to go do. But like I said, we've now said, okay, that process is actually what's the most important thing, not the actual goals themselves. And we all know this, which is, if we all did what society told us to do, we'd be working till we're 65 on W-2 jobs from 9 to 5 with 401ks, right? Because that's what's productive for the total economy of society. But may not be what you want, right? And so when we recognize that, hey, our now goals of moving back to where we want to move back to, still living a prosperous life and what do we want for our family, that doesn't look like a normal W-2 job. We wanted more financial flexibility and lifestyle that almost, hey, we have to pursue something else. And real estate was that medium for that. And so that's how we thought about designing our lives a bit. Want to elaborate?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I think to your point earlier too, I like the comment of, your goals are just the end point, but what we realize the process has been more fun, right? To enjoy and the ups and downs that come with it. So when we talk big vision, I think absolutely everybody should have like I have a vision board literally with cutouts of, magazines and pasted on there. And people need to realize that vision will change in 6 months. It could change in a year or 5 years down the road. And as long as you're okay with that, you can throw everything else out the window and just enjoy the ride, right? And I think the more people realize that, the more okay they will be with how things turn out. Because I think I always tell Ronnie this, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
He wasn't a believer that before. He was like, no, I control my own fate. And I always say, well, yes, that fate happened for a reason. So as long as you're okay with that, then like I said, just enjoy the ride.
My 16-year-old self would be like, why do you drive a minivan? Like, well, I drive a minivan, but we own 1,000 apartment units. So how do you think about that, right? I can't even imagine that as a 16-year-old, but
Yeah.
those were my goals at the time, but those have evolved, right? So
Yeah. Well, speaking of, looking back as your 16-year-old selves, along the process and the journey, if you guys had to do it all over again for when you were first starting out, what would you do differently, or any advice there?
We always say to start earlier, obviously. I mean, the best time to buy real estate was yesterday, right? But once again, I don't know if we would turn anything back. We think that we truly believe this is our work, our W-2 jobs made us very prepared for this future career we're going to have, right? I think we live the life of like, hey, no regrets. And even if something in hindsight could have been done differently, the truth is it happened, right? And it is what it is, right? And so I'm not sure if I would do something different, in my opinion.
So I get asked this a lot too, knowing what I know now, I would have house hacked at a much younger age. And that is the advice I tell all of I have a lot of younger cousins and extended family and friends. Go out, don't buy your first house, buy your first duplex or fourplex and house hack. So that's a big one. And then even for our kids, as we think about their education, what I wish I had learned earlier was a lot more personal financial acumen. Yes, we learned how to balance a checkbook, but nobody ever taught us things about investing. They told us to save, but that's not enough in this day and age. Right. You have to know how to manage and grow your wealth. And that's something I wish and I hope that our kids will have in their school. And if not, we will teach them, ourselves. That's something probably I wish I had more knowledge of at a younger age.
I have to jump in here because this is good stuff. Those are the exact things that I think are one of the most important things that you can do to get intergenerational wealth going, and puts education first on both yourself with the house hacking and then on your kids with teaching of the money. And, I got to say too, I love my parents. They did the absolute best that they could, but they didn't know this was the culture was that you don't share finances with your kids. But when we have kids, that is going to be exactly what we're going to do. We're going to open the checkbook up and we're going to say, this is exactly how this works. Because the questions and getting this out on the table, it's so important. Divorces, the number one cause of divorce is rooted in money issues. And the lack of clarity that you have in the money issues, the less quality of life it's going to be. So that's really, really important. And then on the house hack front, I just have to jump in and add this too, because we used to live in the California Bay Area. You guys know how expensive it is. It's almost as expensive as where you guys are. And when we were starting off, she had a residency going on. I just started my career as a project manager, and we could not afford anything at all. So what we ended up doing was we borrowed some money from Sophie's family and bought a house with an in-law unit in it. And we lived in the in-law unit and we rented out the main house, right? And then they were paying for the mortgage. And of course, it went up in value over time. And then we ended up selling that house and then using the proceeds to buy an apartment building in
There you go.
Indiana. And then, even before that house, like it's crazy to say, but we had 7 rental properties before we had our own private residence. So we were renting in California and we were buying houses in the Midwest. So you guys know what that's like. But
No, that's phenomenal.
That's great advice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I just want to underscore what you guys said, because this is great stuff for listeners to take advantage of for personal growth to start off, and then also to set up intergenerational wealth. Okay. Now I want to change gears a little bit. So when you guys started working in real estate and you guys were getting to the point where you're like, okay, we're starting to see some momentum here. We like multifamily. How did you guys talk about splitting up roles? Because there's a lot to do in this business, right? And one person is good at one thing and then another person is good at another. And a lot of people, when they first start to do this, they start feeling like they're stepping on each other's toes, or there's miscommunication saying, oh, I thought you were going to do that, or, that kind of thing. So how do you guys work together now, and how did that evolve?
Yeah. So when we worked at P&G, I mentioned earlier, we were actually on the same team, I think 2 or 3 different times. We were both in sales. We had very similar roles, just different categories. And so we knew exactly what the other person was doing in terms of roles and responsibilities, right? But we never really reported to each other, which was, of course, a no-no. That would never happen. But we knew what we were good at, because we would come in day out, talk about work, and understand the other person really well. And even at home, right? There's certain things that, I'm good at home and he's not, and vice versa. And so when we transitioned over to real estate, so I've been doing the whole real estate gig full time now for 18 months in multifamily, and he's popped in and out to help look at some of my underwriting and, bounce ideas back and forth. Now that he's joining us full time, so I have a partner as well, Steve Louie. The 3 of us this is how we're dividing kind of the workload. And so Steve is going to focus a lot more on acquisitions. He's built great relationships, knows a ton of brokers, lenders, etc. I will focus a lot more on asset management. It's just what I enjoy doing. And Ronnie has a strong passion for marketing and investor relations. So we fortunately naturally all just kind of divided up really nicely into roles that we needed. But originally, when you work with your spouse, and you do this with any partner, you guys have to figure out, what are you good at and what do you love doing? And so if something doesn't fall in those 2 buckets together, then you either pass it along to somebody else on your team or you outsource it. And again, fortunately for us, all of our buckets kind of aligned perfectly, but that also doesn't mean we can also rotate. So each one of us is great at any of the other person's role. We just double click on the love factor. So we love doing asset management. For me, I'm super detailed and I like running projects to the end. And Ronnie loves marketing. And so again, mirroring up those 2, and then anything else will just fall into place.
Well said, guys. I wanted to underscore too, again here, is there any tools that you could provide our listeners that maybe don't know what their skills are or strengths are? How did you guys determine that? I know that like you guys kind of fell into the roles in the W-2 world, but do you guys have any recommendations or anything for the audience to figure out what their strengths are and passions?
Yeah. So one of the ones I really love is Strengths Finders. So that one, if your listeners haven't heard of that before, it's just, again, one of these tests you take online, and it gives you what your top 5 strengths are. And that helps digest, why you do things that you do, which is, again, really helpful in the business world as well as your personal relationships. And then we've also done the DISC tests and the Enneagram tests. Those are all 3 of them, really great tests to figure out where your strengths are and what your opportunity areas are.
And I'll give you an example from Strength Finders. When I do the test, there's a lot of like pie in the sky, love working on strategy. And then when Jenny does a test, it's like she's an activator. Like she has that too. We both have similar strengths and strategy, but she loves to activate things and make them go. And then in that book, it'll tell you which type of person you should partner with, because it'll tell you the yin and the yang associated with your different strengths. So
Maybe people should do that before they get married. I don't know.
They probably
If
should.
you're born-
That's good advice.
That is true.
You can find the right partner that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So one thing too I wanted to add to this was you should also, and maybe you guys can remark whether or not you found this to be true too. You should also take note of those times where time disappears, where you're doing something throughout life and you're just in this flow state.
Yeah.
That gives you some hints, right? That gives you some ideas like, oh, I should probably maximize what I'm doing, whatever it was that it was in that flow state, because that is where you just receive boundless energy, right? You have passion and energy, and you don't have to wake up and dread going to go do your activity if that's something that you just tap into naturally. What would you guys say about that? Would you agree?
I 100% agree with that. Because you hear this a lot too. If something doesn't feel like a job, that's when you know you're meant to do that. Because our day-to-day grind, W-2 work, 99% of the time, it feels like a job. And that's why you don't necessarily enjoy it. But if you're doing what you love, time will fly. You can work day and night, and it actually energizes you, to your point. So 100%.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to shift gears one more time here. And I wanted to ask you a question it's always on the back of my mind, because it's something that I get really interesting answers for. And it is, when you guys started investing in real estate kind of heavy, right? Like, let's say that you guys have already 9 properties and now you start shifting over to multifamily, right? You're running with Ronnie's idea. What did your family say, or what did your family start seeing when this was happening? Did it deter you? Did it encourage you? Or, what happened to you guys, and what advice do you have for our listeners for that?
It's a really good question.
Yeah, that's I think it's very similar for both of us, but I can speak at least on my side. My in my parents' relationship, my mom was the risk-adverse one. My dad was the business-minded side of the family. And so I grew up more heavily influenced by my mom, right? She was save, save, save. If you buy a house, pay it off. Debt is bad. And so I grew up thinking that. And so when we purchased the first few homes, it was fine. When we got closer to the 10 mark, there was a lot more conversations or questions around, whoa, you're going really fast. Is that the right call? And then even now with multifamily, I still get a lot of question marks about, what happens if the economy downturns again, or half your residents don't pay rent. So I think it's just a mentality that our families grew up with, and it's hard to change your parents' minds, of course. But I would say for my younger family, my cousins, my aunts and uncles that are on the younger side, they get it. And they are asking a lot of questions because they see that we are now both transitioned out of our, full-time jobs and living the life of our dreams. So there's a lot of eyebrows right now wondering how we got there. And we're always happy to share with them.
Yeah, very similar to my parents. I will say that I think our approach has been, we're doing this and we want you to come along for the ride. So we talk, and we talk about it very openly. And we help almost train and educate. Like, my brother and my sister are both single family home investors. Now they want to get into multifamily. And how do we do that? And so there's no jealousy or animosity or anything like that, or any skepticism, because we share everything we learn, right? And we want them to be able to create generational wealth along with us, because it's all one big family, right? And so it's no good if only one of us is in it. And if they're not interested, and we won't talk about it, but when someone as intimate as your brother or your sister is doing something like this, then you're interested, especially if they're doing well in it, right? And so it definitely takes similar convincing in terms of the parents, but coming from Procter Gamble and being successful, they're like, well, if they can be successful at that and taking their focus into this, there's a bit of trust built in because you've had previously successful W-2 careers, right? So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, recently, since I'm also leaving my W-2, I've kind of got the eyebrows raised, kind of like, you're making good money. Why would you ever leave something like that?
Exactly.
And I think, it takes some education and time. And I think that you guys are taking the exact right approach to be an open book, even invite like some of your family members to look at what's happening. And
Yeah.
I personally am really excited. I don't mean to gush here, but my mom and dad are coming next week to visit us here in Utah on our adventure, and we're actually taking a day trip for a property that we're under contract in, and they're coming
Oh,
with us
wow.
just to
Awesome.
do the inspection on the property, just to learn more. So
Oh, that's so
that's
cool.
really cool.
That's a great
That's a
idea.
huge step. That's a great idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love it.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's cool.
Another thing I want to highlight, Ronnie, was that there is no room. What I heard is like, there's no room for scarcity. There's no room for small thinking in this industry, right? Like everyone can come along in for the
Mhm.
ride and grow together and grow
Right.
as big as you want it to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to
And it's
highlight that.
encouraged, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Exactly.
a team sport in multifamily investing, and that's kind of the shift of mindset from the single family to the multifamily, where you're like, oh, instead of being the lone wolf, now let's see who we
Yep.
can bring on board to scale faster. And that's
exactly
just like, it's really, really a different, shift in the brain.
Yeah, in this industry, it's been so wonderful to see everyone is willing to help everyone. And the power of networking is just 100-fold. Example would be I went to a networking event. Somebody invited me to speak at their networking event in Arizona. And then at that networking event, I met someone who now found me a deal. I mean, it's just amazing how, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right, happens in multifamily because the industry is so huge, but the network is so surprisingly small, and everyone just ends up knowing everybody. And it's pretty great to see. So.
Cool. Jenny, this question is for you. And I ask all of our females guests this question just because there might be the preconception that it's a male dominated space. A lot of our listeners are probably like the wives, they're being dragged to listen to this by their husbands. I don't know, right? But what advice, as like a female rock star in this space, would you give to the ladies out there that may be a little bit hesitant, that may be not sure about what the space looks like?
That's a great question. I would say, figure out what drives you and your why. Like I get asked this a lot as well. Why are you doing what you're doing? And for us, it's because of family. And so we sat down and prioritized, what do we want in this short life of ours? We want more time and freedom to do whatever we want, wherever we want, with whoever we want to. And so when we put it that way, it makes your decision making very clear. Okay, well, what does that really mean? Well, it means I need passive income so that I can do whatever I want. Okay, well, how do I get passive income? Well, you could go and invest in, real estate is what we chose, or you can invest in something else that could give you passive income. And so don't be afraid to sit down and have those types of moments with yourself, even, and with your partner, to decide what that why is for you. Because once that's clear, everything else will become a lot easier to sift through and sort, and make that decision making easier. And then I think for this industry, yes, it is currently a male dominated industry for now. More and more women are stepping in. I can list a whole slew of them in this industry that are up and coming, bringing out deals, becoming CEO of their companies, launching podcasts. It's awesome to see. And I would encourage you to just find a mentor. I started with a mentor. He happens to be a male, but he is super supportive in my strengths and things that I can bring to the table. And I would encourage any female to find another female or male, doesn't matter, but find someone who resonates with you and has similar values, because they will help you accelerate and put those fears to rest, and really encourage you to just step out, because it is true. The first deal is absolutely the hardest, but everything after that is super, I shouldn't say easy, but just smoother and much more palatable and even fun, right?
Yeah, Jenny, I was reflecting on what you're saying. And now that I think of it, women are actually more suited to do better in real estate investing than men, because of the natural skills that women tend to have, I think. at least what I've observed is that most women, they can establish trust a lot easier, and they have like a kind of an intuition as to whether or not this person is trustworthy, and just a knack for networking. At least that's what I've generally noticed. It's not for everyone, but I'm just saying that's usually the way that it kind of breaks down. And for some men, including me, this is a learned skill. So there's definitely like a natural advantage there. And I'm seeing a lot more women into the space, which is awesome, because we definitely want to see that here, because man, these women are crushing it out there. There's so many people that are doing fantastic work. So really good stuff.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring that up because it may not get talked about very much, but really at the end of the day, gender is not a barrier to entry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right.
Okay, one last question before we get to the end segment of our show. You guys are awesome. So we're having such a good time here.
Yeah.
So last question is, what do you guys look for in real estate investments? Do you guys have certain criteria that you can share with us? And maybe do you have advice for people who are just starting to look to maybe do what you're doing? Or, what are just some top things to think about when selecting an investment?
Sure. Yeah. So for passive investments that we personally put our money in, we look for both cash flow and appreciation. So the right markets that have both of those are our starting point. And then really what I tell a lot of people as well is you're really investing in the sponsor team. Okay. So a good sponsor can take any deal and make it work and be successful. A good deal can go to the wasteland if the sponsor team is horrible. So it really is dependent on the market, whether or not you believe in that market itself, but more predominantly the sponsorship team. Do they have the track record? Do you, again, like their communication style? Do you trust their execution, and do they have a good track record? That's probably predominantly more of what I look for. And because the returns are kind of the same all around. That's the price of entry. You should be looking at a 7 to 8% cash on cash minimum. Anything less than that, I don't think people should be showing. And then total returns are, the typical 1.7 plus equity multipliers. Again, anything less than that is kind of a non-starter to even get out there. So same returns that what most people look for, but really it's the sponsorship team that I am investing in.
Yeah, I would say too, just to add to that also, is that anyone can build anything in their projections. Like anyone can put anything down, right? You can have an exit cap rate. And for those who know what that is, you can have an exit cap rate where you're compressing 1% and make it look like, you're making 25% rate of return over 3 years, right? So it's like, there's a lot of things you can do, but when it comes down to it, the underwriting is just a benchmark. And the reputation of the sponsor, most times really good sponsors will end up putting just really like mediocre returns or just like, average returns in the investment pro forma. And then everyone gets delighted because they end up like, doing much better than that. And so that's exactly dead on. At least I've been finding is that it's the reputation of the sponsor and the people that operate the property.
Right.
Okay, cool. So thank you guys. Now we're going to head into the end of the show. You guys have been amazing. You've done really good and answered lots of great questions and brought lots of good value to our listeners. But we're going to do what's called the rapid round. It's 5 questions that we ask all of our guests on the show, and it's meant to be answered individually and very quickly as well, within like a 15-minute time span. Okay.
You go first.
No pressure. No pressure.
I should have looked at more of your previous episodes. I figured out
No, it's good that
it's
you
fine,
did it
because you wouldn't believe how many people say that. All right, I'll let Sophie read the questions.
All right. So first question, guys, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why, outside of Rich Dad or the Bible? Because that's
we get those all the time.
Yeah.
So
Atomic Habits, James Clear. I read that a couple months ago, and really, really insightful and impactful tips and tricks.
Life-changing.
The latest one I read was Flip the Script by Warren Claff. And it's a capital raising book, but it's got great stories about capital raising and how to basically flip the script from people selling people to people actually deciding to invest with you. So.
Good book. Isn't he the same author as Pitch Anything?
Yes, same.
Okay.
That's his second book. So,
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. If people wanted to emulate your success, what's the first actionable thing that they could do to follow your footsteps?
Oh, good question. Let's see.
I would say be very clear on your values. So like a lot of times we'll, like I said, life by default, right? We think we know what we want, but do you truly know what you want? What are the values that can associate, the values create the priorities and the goals you have in your life. So making sure you're very clear, and are you living the values that you truly have? I think that's what I would say.
Mine would be find your why, figure out your purpose, why you want to do what you want to do. And then that again sets clear direction for you and the process to get there.
Awesome. Next question is, what small thing do most people not know about you?
Gosh.
I was in a McDonald's commercial when I was a kid.
Awesome.
That is super cool. Wow. We
Back in Canada with Elvis Stoico, the famous figure skater.
Cool.
we have a star in our midst. That's amazing.
And YouTube wasn't available back then, so I cannot find the commercial anywhere. So I have no proof.
I can't even come close to that, Jenny. Like, that's not even fair.
What do people not know about you?
What do people not know about me? That's a hard one.
Small thing.
Well, I'll just tell something that's very topical. Is most people know about this, but we went to the London Olympics, and it was an amazing experience. So if you get a chance to ever go to Olympics, which people might in 2028 because they're coming to LA, please go because it's awesome. So.
Oh
Cool.
man, that's cool. I didn't even know that. Awesome. Okay, so next question is, how do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices individually?
A glass of wine and reading a book. I love reading. So that is probably my zen at the end of the day, or middle of the day. No judging. Yeah.
No judgment.
No W2, no judgment.
Yeah. I work out every morning at 6 a.m. with two other guys over Zoom. So we built, during COVID, all the gyms shut down and we're like, what are we going to do? We had one friend who was working out with cinder blocks. We had a set of dumbbells and we're like, okay, but over time we built up our home gyms, and 6 a.m. every morning we are working out, and that allows me to reset and ensure I invest in myself, right? So.
Wow.
Awesome.
Cool.
And then the last question is, what is your favorite family vacation spot?
Oh. Should we say it on 3? 1, 2, 3. I would say the beach.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, we should have done 1, 2, 3 beach. Okay.
Oh.
We can still do it in house.
Yeah. Our kids can live on the sand, and we always say it's a win-win vacation for us because the kids will just play in the sand, make castles, frolic in the water, and then we're just lounging on the chairs.
We love the beach. Yeah.
So it's really relaxing for us as well. So we love the beach when we go when we can.
Any beach will be there, and
Yeah.
that's usually what we want to seek out.
Yeah, you guys should try Dana Point. That's pretty
Okay.
We
cool.
gotta go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
we
you.
gotta
We'll
go.
check it out.
We'll check it out.
Alright. Very cool. Well, we're at the end of the show here, and we normally run a little bit shorter than this, but you guys have had so much wisdom to share. We thank you guys for coming on. I have to do one more thing because you put this in the application for the podcast. You said that something about an apartment you used to live in college. What's that story about?
Yeah. No, it's been such a fun ride on this one. So I grew up in Arizona, and I went to school at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And just a quick fun story, my partners and I, we found a deal. And sometimes you work and you just space out and you don't recognize certain details. Long story short, we got the property under contract, and then we literally drove up for the inspection. And I was like, wait a second, this is so familiar. Hold on, I used to live here. And so the whole thing was just a trip. So literally walked every single unit, stood inside the one that I lived in my senior year of undergrad. And we ended up going through with the purchase. So that property closed in February of this year, and it's been running great. But yeah, I've yet to meet anyone else who can say that about purchasing a place they used to live in. So it's been a fun ride on that one.
What
Man,
a great
How
story.
cool is that? That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Love that story. So you listeners out there, that can be you.
Yes.
That's right.
Work very, very hard, and eventually you'll be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys. Jenny, Ronnie, thank you so much for being on. It was a pleasure to have you here. Can you guys tell the audience a little bit more about how they can find out more about you and what you guys
Sure.
do?
Yeah, we're both on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can visit us at our website. It's verticalstreetventures.com. Find information about us, set up time. We love meeting new people and continuing the conversation. So just reach out if you'd like.
Excellent. Well, Jenny, Ronnie, thank you guys for being on. And listeners, thank you for listening all the way to the end. We really hope that you guys enjoyed this content on the Elevate Your Equity podcast. So wherever you're listening to this, please like, subscribe, smash that thumbs up button, anything you need to do to try to get the algorithm gods in our favor so that we can get exposure to more people, because we definitely want to get exposed to be able to have a chance to let people know about all of this great passive investing and learning how to do this with your spouse. So if you like it, please engage with us and let us know if you want something to be changed. We're open to that as well. We want to hear what you think about it. So thanks again for coming on, you guys. And this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
We are signing off. Take care, everyone.